The date is Friday, April 1st, and you're listening to Entertain This, a thought-provoking podcast encapsulating all things entertainment. There are two giants of fantasy books that everyone knows of, C.S. Lewis and J.R.R. Tolkien. But what you may not have known is that they were contemporaries and the best of friends. So join us as we explore Middle-earth and Narnia in this enlightening episode, and enjoy!
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to your favorite show on the internet encapsulating all things entertainment. You know it, you love it. It's Entertain This.
Entertain This.
You may find yourself listening to a podcast on a train in a beautiful house with a beautiful wife and a beautiful life. Same as it ever was. Guys, I got a fresh opening for you, a fresh cold opening. It's cold and ready. We got recently nominated for a couple of different categories in the award show known as the Snobby Awards.
Woo! Woo! That's all it gets.
That's good, guys. And I'm going to read out the nominations that we were nominated for. Now, by the time this episode is released, I should mention the award show will have already happened because it is happening on Sunday, March 27th. But for people listening live, which you can do if you follow us on our social medias, you'll get to hear it now, and you get the chance to watch as we either are completely snuffed because this is a kangaroo court and an unfair trial, or we are victorious because we earned it. It's either one or the other, and it's never both. So let's start with our nominees. We have 5 of them, which is great. 5 nominees is huge. The first of those being Podcast of the Year, which is big. Podcast of the Year? Us?
Whoa.
Little old us? For Podcast of the Year? Really?
I don't believe it.
Yeah, we're probably not going to win that one. Also nominated for Podcasters of the Year, and that's listed as Alex Steele, Nick Mustakangas, Michael Savoya, and Chloe Price.
Wow,
showrunner
that's all of us.
checker. That's
I know
all of
those
us
people, yeah.
nominated for Podcasters of the Year. Do I think that we're the Podcasters of the Year? Frankly, no.
No.
But from the small pool that I see here in front of us, could we be Podcasters of the Year? I don't see why not.
Yeah.
I don't see the reason why we couldn't. So I think we might as well be.
Yeah. Sure.
Our next nomination is for Host of the Year, and that is me. I'm nominated for that.
Yeah, I was gonna say our next nomination.
It's
No,
it's
A little
just
bit of
me
collectivism
with-
there, Alex.
I don't understand how it could just be me, considering the show has 3 very equal hosts who all pull the same amount of weight. So
Well,
if I win that, I will be doing a Mean Girls style breaking the crown and throwing it to the crowd announcement, where I'm just like, and a piece for you, and you're also queen. That's what I'll do. So the next nomination is Best Podcast in Education or News. Are we educational?
I don't think
Yeah,
any
yeah.
podcast that has a dedicated fact checker can be educational.
I think that the fact that we hired a fact checker makes us educational, because maybe the podcast isn't about educating the listeners, it's about educating the hosts.
Yeah, very well
I
could
buy
be.
that.
And maybe that's the news that we are providing as well, is, hey, news alert, these 3 white boys pretend to know everything. Turns out they know nothing. Incredible.
I like that.
Our final nominee is Best Interview Show. So I want to give a huge shout out to Mr. Jeff Kenny for being the reason we got nominated for that one.
Yeah,
and the sole
pretty much.
reason. We had some other really great interviews last year, but I doubt they listened to them. So shout out to Jeff Kenny for being our best interview and who brought in the most viewers and listeners to our podcast. Everyone go buy his new book. You'll figure out what it's called when you get to the store to buy it. Great.
It's Wimpy Kid, something or other.
That's probably true. Just buy any of them. I'm sure all the money goes to them.
Yeah, support it.
Anyways, it's another Friday technically. It's not. We record on Wednesdays, but it's another Friday.
It's
for the
April Fool's
listener.
Day, you know that?
Is it really?
Yeah.
Today is, or
I'm
the
gonna
day
say
in which this
It's
is released?
Friday, April 1st, and you're listening to April Fools.
And then you're going to play Big Chicken Bits because you like that podcast better.
Yeah.
Be a
No, I
pretty
wouldn't
funny
do that.
April Fool's joke on all of us.
That would be funny.
Well, here's the April Fool's joke is that we recorded this on March 23rd. So
you guys
April
got
Fools,
pranked.
dumbass. So we got your ass. But another Friday has come. It is April 1st. But what's not a joke is Michael's prepared us a beautiful banquet of knowledge and information, and I cannot wait to consume it. So please serve it up on a silver platter, nice and steamy. Give it to me hot, my baby boy.
Hi, it's me, your baby boy, Michael.
Yeah, that's right.
Hi.
Say it again.
It's me, your baby boy,
Don't.
Michael.
And now I'm going to make that my ringtone.
Please do.
Strictly for when you call.
Oh, yeah.
Hey, that worked very well.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Hi. So we're going to talk about some cool stuff today, guys.
Nice.
We are going to be talking about one person in particular who's one of my favorite creators of some of my favorite fantasy novels, probably my favorite piece of media in existence, as well as his compatriot who has also created a lot of fantastic, like life-defining literature works. Today's going to be a book day.
Book day.
This is going to be my book report.
A book day. We love it. You love it. You read it. We write it. It's book day.
Did you say Booker Day?
Booker Day?
No, that was a couple episodes ago. I'm sorry.
But no, so today I'm going to be doing like a little report for you all on two individuals named J.R.R. Tolkien and C.S. Lewis, and we're going to be discovering a little bit about how they shared a friendship together, which informed two of our greatest works of fantasy literature in existence today.
Nice.
So strap on in and entertain this.
I get those two confused. Am I the only one that gets those two confused?
Who? J.R.R. Tolkien and Martin Scorsese?
Yeah.
Let's let Michael do the talking. He'll explain it.
They're both British guys, right? I mean,
yeah. They're both British. They're both.
I thought you said rich, but I think that's also true.
Both are true. Both are very true. They're both from like Oxford, England. Yeah. So I don't think that's originally where they're from, but that's where they spent a majority of their lives, particularly because they ended up teaching at the same college, Merton College in particular.
So fun fact, that's also where the dictionary is from.
No, that's from
That's
Oxford,
right,
English.
Oxford.
There it is.
Yeah.
Or Merriam-Webster, depending on who you ask.
So let's just start off a little bit by me taking a book out of Nick and Alex's playbook. What all do you all know about these two authors, C.S. Lewis and J.R.R. Martin, J.R.R. Tolkien? Jesus.
Heavy into
it's the two, yeah.
I'm pretty sure that they were heavy into the way of working religion into their stories. I think there's a lot of religious symbolism in both of their books. One of those being the Narnia series, correct?
Yeah. In particular, like The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. Yeah.
Yeah. And then Lord of the Rings is the other, correct?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So I feel like I'm most of the way there. But there's a lot of symbolism, a lot of religious symbolism in both books. And I think they both had a pretty heavy Protestant background, which led them to those symbols and working that kind of a story into what they were telling. So that's what I know. And I feel like that's a pretty good chunk.
Pretty good. That's pretty good. I like it. What about you, Nick?
So I already told you I got them two confused.
You Kentucky boy.
But
hey Nick, your Kentucky's showing.
Beyond that, C.S. Lewis, I think. No, the other guy who wrote the Lord of the Rings. I think he was a medic or something in World War I, and then the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe was written out of based on a true story, I guess, of these children who survived the Blitz in London when the Germans went in there and bombed it because they had to hide. They went away for a summer. They hid in a wardrobe, and then look, it's a magical place. But That's really where my knowledge of those two ends, because I haven't watched the Lord of the Rings films. Well, it's been a while, so I don't remember them. And I think I have seen The Witch in the Wardrobe movie when that came out.
Yeah, that came out when we were like 11, 12.
Yeah.
I know
So that
that
one I
I went
remember.
on a field trip to go see it. And that was
Mm.
like one of the only field trips that ever took us to like the movies. But they were like, well, the movie's coming out for, Narnia. So we'll read the book to the kids and then we'll go see the movie.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I didn't listen when they read the book, but I paid attention when they played the movie. So
Same here.
I was one of those kids who, and this is a generation of children who every time they see a wardrobe, they get inside of it and they start tapping the back wall. I was one of those kids. That was
Nice.
a very real thing that a lot of kids did in our generation.
Yeah. Just in case. You got to check.
Just in case, because you never know if it's going to fall through and you're going to get some tasty treats from a nice lady in all white who is eventually going to be very, very bad. But first, the beautiful candies.
It's like Hansel and Gretel, isn't it? Or
Yeah, I
should
mean,
do,
like-
the little treats.
People are like, Hansel and Gretel is all about, like staying, knowing your boundaries and never going outside your comfort zone. It's like, no, it's about self-control. If they had known when to stop and been like, you know what? I'm good. I'm going to go. Like, it would have been a happy story about kids getting free, like, sweets. And I think the same can be said about Narnia. If Edwin would have just been like, I love these Turkish delights, I'm going to eat them all, and then I think I'm going to hop back in that wardrobe and go home, then, like, happy story for Edwin,
What's a Turkish delight? Does anyone know?
It's like a pastry candy thing. It's like a
okay.
cookie, basically. Like a cookie with jam.
I'm done with that. Anyways.
Nice.
Sorry, I'm hungry. I want dessert.
Dude, Turkish delights are like one of the main things that people remember from that movie because they look
yeah.
just delicious.
Turkish
They're like
delight.
covered in powdered sugar. Oh my god. Oh
Nice.
my
So,
god.
yeah, you all got some good stuff out of there. There's some things that I want to go back and correct though.
We squeezed some juices.
Yeah, so Alec, I think you brought up something that was very important to both of these guys' lives, and that
What's
would be
that?
their religion.
Mhm.
So
Praise be.
praise be. C.S. Lewis was actually raised in like an Irish Orthodox like Christian home.
Uh-huh.
But by the time he was like 15, he became an atheist and remained so for quite a long time, actually. However, he came to meet Mr. Tolkien, who was a very strong Catholic man.
Catholic.
And it's through their friendship that C.S. Lewis actually ended up becoming what's called more of like an Anglican like Christian.
Church of England.
Yeah. And the big thing that came out of this was that like C.S. Lewis in particular was a very like argumentative person. Like he focused not in like a like I'm going to like argue with you to like prove you wrong, but like he needed to like he was always questioning everything.
Hey, that's
And
me.
that's what led him down to the path of like atheism.
Hey.
There was lots of stuff that went on in his life that like he was very angry with God for one for like not existing, but two simultaneously also creating a world where like things happen so badly, like where bad things happen so often. And this was also coming at the beginning of World War I, which we picked up on, Nick, where he actually he fought in the trenches.
Oh shit.
Yeah.
Jeez.
Yeah, and it wasn't until they met together one day in 1926 during a faculty meeting where the two became very drawn to each other. They became very fast friends through just talking about their shared experiences and their mutual interest in like writing and fantasy and history. In particular, C.S. Lewis was much more focused on the actual like literature side of things, and that was what he taught at Merton. However, Tolkien, he actually wasn't much of a like literature guy. He was much more focused in languages, mythologies, histories, and those were the sorts of subjects that he taught. which then you can compare that to the actual works of fiction that they write, where C.S. Lewis is much more of like a traditional like writer, where he's basing his stories off of like already known stories. His stuff is like very focused in allegories and has like a very strong connection with a very specific audience in mind. In particular, the Narnia series that is traditionally seen as like more of like a young adult, early teenager, like first chapter book sort of situation.
Definitely.
And it's meant to kind of show the story of Jesus in a way that would be like very easy to comprehend for young adults.
Wait for it, Nick, because Jesus is the lion in this story.
What?
Aslan is a Jesus figure, my man.
Yeah.
Sacrifices himself.
Can you remind me what the lion does in these books?
Yeah. So
like
real
king.
quick. Yeah, real quick. I'll just do like a quick little shallow dive into what each book is.
Let's do it.
In
go
particular, we're going to be focusing on The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe and The Lord of the Rings as a whole series. So
Got it.
The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe,
Faster.
that is the story about that's the story about the four kids who they find a wardrobe in the back of one of the offices at their guardian's house, and they fall through it, and in doing so they end up coming to the land of Narnia. In that land of Narnia, one of the siblings ends up unintentionally aligning himself with the bad guy.
Edwin gets Turkish delights.
Yeah, then he gets Turkish delights.
She's the Satan figure.
Yeah,
She's using temptation.
the winter.
temptress.
I don't remember her like literal name, but I think it's like the Winter Witch or something.
I thought it was the White Witch.
Yeah,
The White
that's right.
Witch. Yeah. But yeah, and so there is this constant feud kind of going on in this land of Narnia between the White Witch and everyone else, basically, who is led by Aslan, the lion. The world is kind of inhabited by like satyrs and centaurs and other mythological creatures, but the focus is primarily on the White Witch and Aslan.
Because like basically one can rule, and
Yeah.
whoever rules the people, even if they want Aslan, they have to obey the White Witch.
Yeah.
So it's like if Aslan wins, then they can obey Aslan. If the White Witch wins, then they have to obey the White Witch. But like it's not like, well, they can way overpower her, so why don't they just take her out? That wasn't the rules of the land. That's why it made sense.
The thing that's really funny about that is like throughout, it's like everyone is fighting to make Aslan like the king. Aslan doesn't want to be king. Aslan wants to win so that he can make the kids the kings.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why and it's kind of like an allegory for Jesus being this person who's lifted up throughout his whole life, but then sacrifices himself to make everyone, all of the children of God, inheritors of his kingdom in heaven.
There you go.
Yeah. And that's kind of like, so what ends up happening is they get into this big war, everyone's fighting. Aslan realizes that the only way that he can really stop the war from even happening in the first place is if he goes and sacrifices himself. So he goes and he like willingly walks into the Winter Witch or the White Witch's camp, and they perform like a whole ceremony and just straight up just sacrifice him. Yep. However, after I think one night, I think in the book, or I think in the movie, I think it's 3 nights in the books.
That's convenient.
Yeah, sun shines upon Aslan's corpse, and he is then resurrected to return to the battle, which is happening in the midst, and completely turns the tides.
Nice.
And they win. The kids become rulers. They live there for like 20 something years.
They grow up, which
Yeah,
is
they like
wild.
fully grow up and everything. And then at some point, they find themselves back at the woods that they originally came into from when they first entered. They follow the woods out, go through the wardrobe, or they find the back of the wardrobe, go through it, and in the process, they return back to the exact moment that they went into the wardrobe. They're back to being kids.
Whew, time space
Yeah.
is weird, man.
Yeah. So that's basically The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. Lord of the Rings. There's a ring of power. People want it. It finds its way to a hobbit. The hobbit's name is Frodo. He has to go to Mount Doom to go throw it in.
All of
Lots
the
of
evil in the world is powered by this ring. That's important.
Essentially, yeah.
Okay.
It's basically like a mission to destroy all evil. is what they're going on.
Yeah.
Great. I hope he does it.
Yeah, it's like all evil, the remaining power of all that is evil in the world is contained in this ring, and it's trying to find its way back to Sauron, so that Sauron can reform and fight back against the good.
He's the eyeball, right?
Yeah,
The
yeah,
eye of yeah.
Got it.
Is there more to him, or is he strictly an eye? Or like
No, there's more
when he
to
gets
him.
the ring, he gets to be the rest of him.
Yeah.
Like-
So you know how Gandalf, when he dies when fighting the Balrog,
Spoiler alert, but yeah.
Yeah, there's a moment in there where he experiences like this white nothingness, and that's kind of like the equivalent to what is happening to Sauron, except it's happening to Gandalf much faster. Basically, Gandalf gets put into this place where he can like recharge.
It's where Harry Potter met with Dumbledore. One time.
Basically, yeah.
All wizards have one. You just got to get on board.
Yeah,
the recharge voice.
Yeah. So, and he ends up becoming like a much more powerful version of who he used to be, and that's
and he
essentially
gets bleached. That's why it becomes Gandalf the
his
White.
gray robes become white. His hair goes from gray to white, and he becomes stronger.
Is that the Clorox dimension where they just 40 bleach?
Yeah, that's what happens to
Stunning whites.
Essentially, that's what's happening to Sauron, except Sauron can't like fully finish recharging unless he has his ring.
Oh,
yeah,
that makes sense now.
Yep. And so the whole idea is Frodo and his friends, they all have to go to Mount Doom, which is where Sauron lives, and that's where the ring was forged, because the ring can only be forged by the fires of the mountain that it was created in. They have to go, they do it, they throw it in, and then all is good. A little bit simpler on the Lord of the Rings side, which is funny considering how much more complex the actual events are than what happens in
There's so many factions in Lord of the Rings. Like you're talking
there
about
really are
the Balrogs, and I know there's orcs and
the thing is, a lot of it comes down to like there's one good guy, one bad guy, and then a bunch of like branches off from that.
Here's some okay guys.
Here's because Sauron isn't even like the biggest bad guy in the universe.
Huh.
Yeah. I can't remember the name of the guy above him. But
is it an even bigger eye?
He has a butthole.
Yeah.
Oh, that's what it is.
Yeah.
The third eye.
A giant butthole.
The whispering eye of evil.
Educational, huh?
Yeah. So anyways, so they both are famous for particularly creating these two series of novels. However, C.S. Lewis, as we kind of dove into, was he spent a lot more of his time focusing on creating works that focused on Christian apologetics. So Christian apologetics is basically like the side where you argue for Christianity, where you create arguments against why Christianity would be false, and then you try and disprove them. In particular, a lot of these arguments were done in a series of books, in particular called the Screw Tape Letters.
I've heard of this.
These are letters that he wrote to other people who were asking him quite different questions about Christianity, and him doing his best job to try and answer them. And a lot of this stemmed from his previous experience as a atheist. So it was different questions that he had asked himself, and then was able to find the answers through the Bible for. A lot of it is just kind of taking like little phrases and passages from the Bible and creating arguments on top of those using logic.
Interesting.
Sounds like some shit I'd do.
Yeah.
Sure, why not?
Yeah. But yeah, so when we compare the two of these guys, C.S. Lewis was much more well known for his religious writing and his allegories, where Tolkien was much more well known for creating worlds focused on large amounts of history and mythos. in particular, one of the things that Tolkien really focused on was he noticed that like lots of different cultures had very extensive mythos is based upon their own histories, whereas England in particular didn't really have that. The reason kind of going back to when the Roman Empire kind of came through and kind of eradicated all of their like native people, essentially completely eradicated their cultures at the very least. Any sort of long-standing like mythos that would have been there was completely wiped out. Like since a lot of it was like told orally, we don't really have much history for what happened there. And so Tolkien kind of set out for like a mission on himself, was to kind of create what he in his mind would be his own mythos for England. So if we go back and we think of like the Egyptian gods, and like the pharaoh, the stories of pharaohs becoming like gods in and of themselves, and then their children, or like we think about like the Greek gods, the stories of Hercules. That's what he wanted to set out and create for England. And he did this borrowing very heavily from his own knowledge and experience with previous histories and mythologies. In particular, one of his biggest inspirations was oh god, I'm forgetting the name of it. It is one of the oldest classical forms of mythological literature, and now I'm forgetting the name of it.
Homer's The Odyssey.
Okay, you'll find it.
Not the Odyssey. No, it's more of like a Nordic based. It was almost more of like Saxon.
Yeah, that's where you get the whole name of Anglo-Saxon.
Beowulf.
Yeah.
The story of Beowulf.
Yes. Most of it was based very heavily on his own experience with reading Beowulf. Yeah, and one of the things that at the time was really hard to come by was having the ability to like for the average person to be able to read those sorts of stories. Beowulf was translated very, very sparsely at the time, and it was very hard to kind of get a copy of it that your average person could read. And so Tolkien took it upon himself to create, before ever writing even his first book, creating an incredibly rich and storied mythos and history for the world of Middle Earth. Like in the actual like writing of it, like Middle Earth in essence within this overarching world that it takes place on would be the equivalent of Great Britain.
The middle of
No
the
way.
earth.
Yeah. Yeah.
No, it's
On a standard map, that is like the middle, so that makes sense.
Yeah.
ish.
Which is funny because if a cartographer had positioned it at all different, then in Lord of the Rings they could have been traveling through like a bit to the right Earth or a bit to the left Earth.
Oh yeah, it is kind of the middle because Greenwich. That's like where the latitude begins, right? I think.
Something like
Or is
that.
it longitude?
What I think is important to note, especially for you, Nick, is that all this shit was happening before Dungeons and Dragons. So like this is the shit that Dungeons and Dragons is based off of.
Yeah.
It's like these stories. So when you're like Dungeons and Dragons, where'd that come from? It came from the works of these writers, and some of the stuff that is present in their writing immediately translated to the first edition of D&D because they wanted to live out the adventures that they had read about in stuff like Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, that all makes sense now.
So when you think of D&D, and more importantly, our upcoming campaign for Project Icosa, just remember it's basically Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
Just your own little version of it.
Yeah, I'll have to go watch Lord of the Rings eventually. Again.
Like Alex said, first edition D&D like very heavily borrowed from
To the point where they got sued.
Yeah, one thing that is very well known about the Tolkien estate, they're very stingy with giving property rights out. So like the first edition of D&D, two examples in particular, you'll notice that
treants, right?
Yep. They used to be called Ents, like the Ents in Lord of the Rings, tree people. Now in D&D, they're called treants. So instead of ENTS, it's now TRENTS.
They could just call him Trent.
Yeah.
What? Trent.
And then also like halfling. Those used to be called hobbits.
Hobbits, yep.
What? No way.
Yeah.
But then they got sued, so they were like, we'll make them halflings.
Yeah.
They're short, they got furry feet, it's the same thing.
Well, and even in like Tolkien's works, they're referred to as halflings a lot, but usually it's just used as kind of like a descriptor of like a person half the size of a regular person.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, is that what it means?
Yeah, essentially.
I'm talking about like half what do you call the dwarf or something like that? And you mix it with a human, it's a half. I don't know. I have no idea. I'm just
Your math, you didn't even finish the statements that you were making for me to help you suss out what you were trying to get. So probably not is going to be my answer.
Okay, got it.
Probably not.
That's all it is, just half the size of a normal human.
Yeah.
Okay. They have the same proportions of a normal human, or rather a healthy, fully grown human, but they are, their proportions are exactly halved.
Okay.
Yeah.
That makes a lot more sense now.
Yeah. So Lord of the Rings and Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, two incredibly important works.
And both somehow connected to D&D, which is something I just learned today. So
I mean,
we are educational, right?
I mean,
guys?
the thing is, D&D is every fantasy ever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like
that's why we so easily gave you guns in our upcoming campaign.
Like, yeah, he has a sidearm. Why not?
Yeah.
The beauty of D&D is that it can be whatever you want it to be. But the beauty of these books was that you got to travel on the adventure with the characters in the books. And that's what inspired people to want to play D&D, because they would finish Lord of the Rings and then they would be like, I am not done yet. I want to keep going.
Yeah.
Huh.
It's kind of like, I want to be a character in Middle Earth. I like a party of humans, elves, dwarfs, wizards, and hobbits.
Mm-hmm.
I want some of that action. And then and that's where like a lot of the classical like archetypes come from of characters. You've got like the ranger is kind of like how Aragorn is, a tracker who moves through the woods. You got like wizard, obviously Gandalf.
I know what a wizard is.
Yeah, and then you've got like fighter, which is more like Legolas or Gimli, just two different flavors of it.
I mean, you got dwarves too.
Yeah.
You know? That
It's
famous line, and my axe, you know, like that's huge D&D energy.
Oh yeah. But yeah, so they both kind of used each other as just writing backboards for everything that they did. It turned out that they were actually some of each other's biggest critics. Tolkien in particular really didn't enjoy C.S. Lewis. C.S. Lewis's like penchant for fitting allegories into a story and basing his stories off of allegories and kind of creating that structure before he even began, as he felt like it hampered his creativity so much. Imagine instead of like getting a puzzle and having like a million different combinations of images that you can create without an actual like base image, compared to how we traditionally solve puzzles. We have a base image that we want to put together and it has to fit in this exact way. That's kind of like what working with an allegory is like. Tolkien much preferred the experience of just kind of creating the world from the ground up and then building stories on top of that.
It's like riding with training wheels.
Yeah. In particular, Tolkien was very focused on his books being kind of like a personal hobby more than anything. And so he really wrote his books for himself. In particular, funnily enough, between The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings, as many people would know, The Hobbit is kind of like the prequel to the Lord of the Rings. It's the story about how Bilbo, Frodo's uncle, gets the One Ring. However, in The Hobbit, there's never any mention of that ring being the One Ring. The whole story kind of goes by. It happens on Middle Earth, but it's not anything that really is like, it's meant to be more of a children's novel, kind of similar to The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. They both kind of fit into that same category of books. However, it came to a point in time where The Hobbit became extremely popular and publishers were clamoring to get Tolkien to write a sequel. Tolkien didn't want to write a sequel. He wanted to write about more in-depth stuff about Middle Earth. He wanted to write stuff more like the Silmarillion, which is basically a historic encyclopedia of his made-up world.
Which is what all the nerds out there wanted.
Yeah. Like imagine
Give us more.
Wanting like an Old Testament of the Lord of the Rings. That's basically what the Silmarillion is.
Can I step in here and say that's a bit excessive for the average reader?
Well, because the thing is like I said, for Tolkien, the writing wasn't for anyone in particular. It was just like he wanted to write stories he liked about his world that he made.
That's because it was a hobby. He wasn't doing it to make money, so he didn't feel like he needed to fulfill the market cap that was left for him.
Right.
He just wanted to write what he wanted to write, and what he wanted to write was an encyclopedia of his made-up world.
Yeah, except no publisher was going to be like, no. Like, no publisher is going to be like, yeah, like we want we want some of that. Like, everyone's going to really enjoy that. No, everyone loved the Hobbit, so like, make more Hobbit.
Make more Hobbit, idiot. That's basically what they said.
Yeah. So Tolkien.
What a guy.
Yeah, Tolkien was like, all right, cool. I got you.
He trashed it, didn't he?
He didn't trash it. He basically took every single bit of the Hobbit and made it fit into this grand universe that he created, so that it forced it to expand upon the heavier elements of it.
Incredible.
In particular, by tying the magic ring that Bilbo found, to being the one ring of power, you are now branching into a world of these cosmic forces fighting against each other. You have the good, like the general good versus the general evil.
So it's like, whoopsie, we inspired you to write the greatest fantasy story of all time.
Yeah, it's like what it's basically Tolkien giving like a giant middle finger to publishers. Like, I'm gonna write my damn story about my fantastic world.
But then it was accidentally kind of the best thing he ever did.
Yeah.
The publishers were like, "Oh no, you got us." That's wild, man.
Yeah.
I learned recently, and this is kind of an adjacent point, but have you guys read To Kill a Mockingbird?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So did you know that there was
we were
a sequel?
supposed to. I'll say that much.
Do you know there was a sequel to Kill a Mockingbird?
Is it called To Mock a Killing Bird?
To Mock a Killing Bird? Do you want to give that another go, my man?
No, I'm good.
Okay. So yeah, To Kill a Mockingbird by Harper Lee.
Is it called Two?
There was a sequel called Go Set a Watchman.
Mm-hmm.
And what's funny about the sequel is that it sucked. It was
That's probably why I hasn't heard of it. Yeah.
It was like so it was released in 2015, which is...
So that's a pretty big gap in between the books.
Which is wild, right?
Yeah.
But it was forced out, and there's like a huge conspiracy about it, where people believe that Harper Lee was basically in a nursing home, and like the publishers were like, you have to make another book. Everybody wants another book before you die. You got to make another book. And she like didn't want to do it. And they went through her stuff and found like what they thought was maybe a first draft of To Kill a Mockingbird. And it set all of the characters in the future at much older ages. And they went ahead and published it and called it, Call You a Watchman or whatever. And like she couldn't do anything about it. Publishers are assholes is what I'm getting at.
Wow.
When you make something great and like a huge stepping stone for the literary arts, publishers will absolutely milk you to death. So the fact that I guess he was able to write The Hobbit and then turn around and write like the second one, and he still got what he wanted out of it, and it was still a hugely successful book. When I know about the whole like thing that happened with To Kill a Mockingbird is huge.
Kind of puts it in perspective.
Crazy. Yeah.
When did To Kill a Mockingbird come out? That was like the 30s, wasn't it?
No, I don't think so.
It was a while back. We'll leave it at that.
It was a while back. It was 1960.
Okay, so that's like what, a 50-year gap in between the books? Clearly, she wasn't going to make a sequel.
Yeah,
and
that wasn't her plan.
You can't make a sequel 50 years after the point, and then it's like, oh, cool, I guess. Thanks. Guess I'll read it. Guess I'll be forced to read it in high school. I don't know.
So, in particular, So now we've established that like these two authors are kind of at the top of their game.
Oh
You
yeah.
got C.S. Lewis creating like the whole series around Narnia, Tolkien creating the whole series around Middle Earth.
Mhm.
Well, it turned out that a lot of these conversations they would have would always be happening at the same place. And there's a place in Oxford that is known for being their typical gathering spot. This being the Eagle and the Child pub in Oxford, England.
Oh well, that's
Uh,
lovely.
Yeah, and it's still a pub that you can go to today.
Typical
And they
English
have a little
fashion.
glassed off table, and their drinks are still there, and the half smoked cigarette
No,
still
actually,
is smoking.
I think you can go sit your butt in the same spot that Tolkien or Lewis's butts touched.
Weird.
That's
Yeah.
cool, I guess. I
It's
don't know.
like my butt's touching their butt.
Have a point. Down to the pub.
But frequently, a lot of the times, these meetings, it wasn't just the two of them. It was also some of their other fellow literature friends from the college or previous students, or even like their own kids.
Oh.
And they ended up forming a group that became very well known called the Inklings.
Well, that's
Just
lovely.
a whole bunch of friends who just came together to talk about fiction and writing and just having fun while doing it, and came to argue with each other.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And it's through those conversations is where Tolkien actually converted C.S. Lewis to becoming a Christian again.
Wow.
It's over these conversations while talking about their own works of literature and how they tied back into their own shared experiences where these conversations would get brought up. And the thing that's crazy about it is that in order for Tolkien to have convinced C.S. Lewis to become a Christian again, he had to have made some really damn good points.
It's a hard battle to fight.
Oh, yeah, because C.S. Lewis is one of the most like skeptical motherfuckers on the planet. Like he going back to even like you would know like a literature kid, like any kid who grows up just loving literature and having that be something that they know they want to make their career. There's some well-read motherfuckers.
They read too much.
Yeah. And you get to like C.S. Lewis even had like particular people that he pointed to who made like his favorite and strongest arguments for atheism. I was like, I know like I haven't done research like that. I don't care enough to go read like historic literature for or against religion.
Well, I mean, there's a good reason to do that, especially when you're, interested in things like that, because learning the other side's point of views will either, one, change your point of view, or two, it will tell you exactly what they're going to argue. So you can just turn right back around and be like, but what about this? In either way, you're getting something out of those conversations or, those pieces of literature and things like that. It's important when you're a writer to see from all perspectives, because if you miss a perspective, then you're not giving a truthful and full allocation to what you're writing about.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I respect him a lot more learning that from you, Michael.
Yeah. Honestly, like both him and Tolkien are very apart from them just being like, these almost near mythological people when it comes to fantasy writing and just the works that they've put out into the world. Once you go back and look through their own life experiences and who they were as people, that you kind of come to understand who they actually were, and you respect them a lot more for the people that they were, not just the works that they put out. And that's honestly like one of my favorite parts of reading is not just reading the stories that people put out, but learning about the authors who put them out in the world. One thing in particular that I learned a lot, especially after reading The Lord of the Rings for the first few times, was learning about how Tolkien in particular was really fond of using a strategy called it was all about like telling the story from the perspective of the least knowledgeable character in that given situation.
Huge.
Especially when we're talking about like a world that was full of just tons and tons of information where things are constantly being spat at you the whole time. How do you communicate that in a way that never actually removes the reader from being engrossed in this fantastical world. So oftentimes we're met with lots of cliches like amnesia, or just having blank slate characters that somehow have lived their whole lives in these fantastical worlds but yet know nothing about them. um, a good example of this is in one of my favorite games of all time, Legend of Zelda Breath in the Wild.
Hey,
You wake up as Link with no memories of the world before, and so everything has to be slowly drip fed into you, and that's how you kind of learn about the world.
which I actually quite enjoy.
It's one of those things, like, if it's done really well, it can be very enjoyable. But it's never one of those things where it's like it makes you feel like engrossed in the world, especially when it comes to like a video game where it's like, oh, Link, you have bombs now, hold down B to and it's just like, all right,
Hey,
cool,
Link,
I get it, I'm
now
playing
you
a video
have
game.
Bombs.
But then you look at it from the story of like the Lord of the Rings, where it's like all of these characters that are going through this, they're all like minimum in their like 40s and 50s. They've lived almost an entire lifetime in this world, so each one of them has so much knowledge. So how do you combat that notion of like needing to explain things to the reader about this world you've created? Well, you create a character who knows a lot about one thing in particular. In this case, it's Frodo. He knows a lot about being a hobbit, what it's like in Hobbiton and what it's like in the Shire. And that's what he knows best. And so starts it off while giving like almost like an encyclopedic reading of the hobbits and the Shire. But then as soon as the adventure starts, Frodo doesn't know anything about what's happening out in the world or where things come from. So everything needs to be fed into him. There's even cases where Frodo isn't even actually in the story of what's currently happening. And so Tolkien pivots to the reading happening from the viewpoint of a completely different character, just whichever one would have the least knowledge in that situation. In particular, there's one case where he does violate this, though. And this is how he really drives it home that you are in like a living and breathing world, and you just kind of understand that these characters know a lot more about this than you do. At the very beginning of the Two Towers, pretty much the entire fellowship gets split. You got Frodo and Sam who go and do their own thing. They leave the group because Frodo doesn't want to tempt anyone who might want to steal the ring. You got Merry and Pippin captured by a bunch of orcs, getting taken back to not to Mordor, to the place where Saruman lives.
Not it. Sorry.
Yeah. Isengard. They're taking the hobbits to Isengard. And then you got the other crew. You got Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli. And they're just kind of left like, all right, I guess we got to go find our friends. Let's go get Merry and Pippin. But it's at this moment that the story takes place from Aragorn's point of view. Probably one of the most knowledgeable people in this story. And it's during this time that the thoughts that are going through Aragorn's head they reference things that we have no clue about, that are never ever mentioned in the story. Like he'll just say like, oh, those trees grew faster than the queen of this one place. And you're like, who of where town? And it's like, I don't know, not gonna explain it.
Got it, Aragorn. Thanks.
It's just one of those things where it's like Aragorn knows more about this world than you do. And he, like, because Aragorn wouldn't think like, oh, the queen of this place, which is where this happens, and like they're known for their exports of this and all that. It's like you wouldn't think like that. So Tolkien doesn't write that. And it just leaves little sprinkles within the world of like things that are mentioned but never explained. Kind of taking the whole point of view of just like, all right, cool. Like you are embodying this character and just whatever they are thinking and feeling right now. And it's your job to put any pieces that you don't know together. One of the things that kind of makes that even more interesting is if you look back at the books, the entirety of The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings are written from just a few characters' perspectives. What I mean by that is at the very beginning of Lord of the Rings, Bilbo is finishing writing his story, which covers all the events of The Hobbit. So essentially, The Hobbit is written from Bilbo's perspective.
Cover to
You
cover?
get to from cover to cover. You get to The Lord of the Rings. Bilbo is finishing writing his story.
Mhm.
Eventually, Frodo picks up where Bilbo left off to continue telling the tale of the ring, which he then hands off at the end of the series to Sam, and Sam puts the closing bit on it. The whole entirety of The Hobbit and the Lord of the Rings is essentially written by three characters from other characters' point of views within the story.
That's an important point, and you just kind of reminded me of how a good RPG game is created, because you can talk to a lot of people and, like let's say Fallout New Vegas, they know a lot about their immediate surroundings, but do they know about like the Deathclaw Cave? Probably not.
Yeah.
So everybody knows something, nobody knows everything, and I think that's an
Yeah.
important point to kind of hit on again.
Yeah, but that's one of the things that is oftentimes like so disenchanting when it comes to RPGs. It's like for Fallout 3 in particular, like I remember getting to Megaton, and like you would imagine a place with a nuclear bomb at the center of it. A lot of people in the wasteland would know of that place.
Yeah.
They get there and nobody bats an eye at you just being like, Megaton, what's that? Like, and then they go into like the history of Megaton and their role there, and it's just like, all right, I get it. I don't know anything about this world, but like, I feel like if the person's not surprised by the fact that you don't know anything, then it can be really like it can take you out of it
a little bit, yeah.
And that's one of the things that I think like a lot of writers could stand to pull from Tolkien's kind of tool bag. Like, write your stories as if it is a real world.
Yeah,
not like you're not like you're drip feeding information onto this blank slate. Like, you gotta like treat, like if your person truly doesn't know anything, treat them as if you would a normal person who like wouldn't know like president, like Biden is the president, or doesn't know anything. Like, imagine like a 35-year-old who like is from like middle America kind of coming up to one of us and just being like, yeah, what's going on? Like, are we like,
you live
is
under a rock?
Is the Cold War still happening?
Some would argue yes. Unfortunately.
Like what happened? Like what's been going on? Like, who's who? Like, and you just be like, your first thought is, where have you been for the last 30 years? And no one in stories like really ever asks that. It's just like, all right, cool, yeah, I guess you don't know anything, I'll explain it to you. It's like, explain it like I'm 5 to like an adult person.
So it all started back in World War II.
Right. Yeah. And that's, and I think that kind of goes back to like why some of my favorite like video game stories are like the Dark Souls games or like Bloodborne or Elden Ring. It's, these stories don't really treat you as this like completely unknowing person, because like a lot of the times these stories aren't told to you. The stories are found through excerpts of written on like item descriptions, where it makes references to things that aren't explained, that you have to go find another weapon that does explain it, so that you can fit the pieces together to actually fill the gaps of the whole story.
It's making a puzzle as opposed to viewing a picture, I guess.
Yeah, exactly.
If you want to get metaphorical about it.
Yeah, and the thing that makes puzzles great for people who enjoy puzzles is actually putting the pieces together yourself and creating that artwork that you get at the end.
Chloe also hates puzzles, if I can throw that in.
I mean, I'll do them, but come on.
what I want to kind of harper back to for a moment, if I may, and kind of throw it back to D&D, because that's how I personally attach to these stories.
Yeah.
What is so incredible about specifically DMing a campaign is that, and Nick, this is more insight for you because I'm sure Michael understands completely.
Oh, I can roll an insight check.
No, thank you. But the thing about being a DM is you are writing a story, just as, Tolkien did. But you don't get to control the characters or what they do. So you build the world. And like Michael said, you need to write your story as though you were someone living in that world. You're kind of forced to, because your players, the characters in your story that you're writing, are physically living in that world.
Yeah.
They are affecting the world. They are making changes in the world. They are creating a world. And that's what's so cool about DMing is anybody who thinks that they can write out a campaign and run it from start to finish is a psychotic person, because once the players get in there, whatever plans you had are gone. But that is what makes those stories, when you're sitting at a table playing D&D, so interesting, is the fact that the world is physically alive in front of you, and the story is a collaborative art between people who care about each other. So like the thing about D&D that's so crazy is that it is Lord of the Rings, but you're on an adventure with your friends.
Mm-hmm.
It's some of the best writing comes out of D&D.
Oh, absolutely. Like even thinking about it, like the hard part with being one of the hardest parts about being DM is knowing like when to stop. Like you can take like a Tolkien like level of like detail to your world and explain every little bit and piece before your players ever touch it. But is your adventuring party ever going to come across the glade of satyrs that exists in this far off corner of the world that they are hundreds of miles from? Maybe, but if there's like 100 other things that they could go interact with, probably not.
Yeah.
So a lot of the times building D&D stories and worlds for these campaigns is building out the world before your players get there, but from an idea of where your players are currently at.
Mm-hmm.
Like if your players are all centered around this one city and that's where everything starts, start building the world from that city out.
Mm-hmm.
Start from there, and then as everything kind of progresses and waterfalls and all of these like other triggering events happen and create these other events that are happening in other places, then you can start building the full world while still kind of keeping in mind what your adventuring party is currently doing. Some of my favorite stories in D&D take place in worlds that where things are happening that the players don't even know about. Where it's like you have things happening in a far off country that is like happening as your adventuring party is progressing. Maybe they go over and maybe something from their eventually affects the adventure that they're going on. But there could be like 30 sessions that go by where nothing from there ever even happens. But one domino can knock over the other dominoes that eventually culminates in something major happening for your characters that they didn't even know could possibly happen.
That is especially juicy when you Chekhov's gun your characters.
Oh, yeah.
Where it's like, in the first session, you met this guy, and now 30 sessions later, you realize what meeting this guy meant.
Or some of my favorite parts is like you have that guy, but your players do this thing to him or have this experience with him, which then triggers this other thing that he decides to do. And then that has its own domino effects that eventually culminate in like this person that you might not have even known becoming a major player in the world. But it can all be traced back to like, oh yeah, it's because you decided to donate some money to this beggar on the side of the street.
Wow.
Yeah.
Lord of
Too
the
deep.
Rings and D&D, their stories go hand in hand, mostly in the case of they're about friends gathering and having a good time together and going on adventures. That's what it's all about.
Yep.
Well, how about
Which
that?
can all be traced back to the friendship between C.S. Lewis and J.R.R. Tolkien.
Holy shit, we wrapped it up in a nice little bow. Well done, Mike.
We did it.
Thanks.
With a single statement, you killed it. Wow. Incredible. You got anything else for us, Mike, or is that all you got?
No, that's about it.
All right. Well, I got a quick this coming from your boy in the past, John Kincaid of Big Chicken Bits, coming at you right now. Take us there, editor Nick. Woo!
Pass the baton. Do it.
I stopped recording already.
I can't do anything.
Hey guys, thank you for anybody who's out there watching live. We, when we have guests on, we record our quick this sessions in the past, and then we edit it to put it here so that John didn't have to show up twice. But for those of you who are watching at home, I'll throw it out to you just so that you feel nice and warm and cozy inside. Entertain us so we can entertain you. and you can entertain this. And we'll see you guys next Friday. And by the way, when I say entertain this and we point down, we mean this show. So I just want to say that real quick to people listening. We mean this show and not D's Nuts. Next. Thank you. Close it. Cut it off. Whore!
This episode of Entertain This was written by Michael Savoya, with additional commentary from Alex Steele and Nick Mustakangas. Our showrunner and resident fact-checker is Lloyd Price. Our theme music is Rushable by Aaron Spencer, with interstitial music by DJW. Tune in every Friday for new episodes, and thanks for listening.